Welcome back, you're here with Nate28 and this is Crossbeats production. So I've got to say thanks to you guys for tuning in once again. And this is going to be a tutorial on how to master your track. Now this particular track that I'm working on is a track by Point 5 and it's going to be released under the Down Under label group. And he's pretty much got some pretty good tracks on this album that's coming out. So I just wanted to show you a snippet of the track and also show you and explain to you how I went about mastering this track and what I did, and also the process behind the mastering of the track. There is no real rule of thumb for mastering per se, but there are some guidelines I guess you could stick to and you'd like to use when you master a track. The process of mastering a track, just so you understand if you don't or you're not familiar with mastering, is basically to sweeten up the mix and make it presentable for the world to listen to, and it's the copy that is the final copy that you would produce from going forward after it's mastered and finalized. So I want to show you guys first off a process chart which I found online, which was quite good, and I want to share it with you guys on how I guess the chain of EQ, multiband compression, analog EQ, harmonic exciting, and limiting. Okay, so with mastering, what I normally do is, first off, obviously look at the gain. So you look at the gain structure on the mastering, and you look at the gain where the original track gain is at, and I'll just quickly bring that back up again. So you look at the gain and just check out where that's at, and then you have an idea of how much kind of headroom you have to play with before you hit zero unity or maybe minus 1. 0.1 or minus 1, whatever you want to use. A lot of people use 0.03, I think it is, for their kind of head threshold, but I tend to try and at least keep dB or even more prior to the ceiling, because when you're putting it into, say, YouTube, or you're putting it onto iTunes or things like that, they have their own compression algorithms that they use, and they might interfere with the way that your track sounds in the end if it's put to iTunes or things like that. So I tend not to blast mine insanely loud, so much so that it starts to change or distort or whatever that end result might be on those platforms. So anyway, with the gain structure, obviously with mastering, you want to leave yourself some headroom. So I guess rule of thumb is probably maximum minus 6 dB before mastering, and that gives you at least a bit of play or room to mess around with EQs and compression and things like that, because obviously there will be a gain increase when you introduce certain things such as EQ, especially if you're increasing EQ and you're not doing reductive EQ. But mainly I guess I kind of aim for minus 12 dB, and that's the peak dB, that's not the RMS. So mastering, I guess in the end you could aim for about minus 10 RMS, constant RMS dB, and kind of go around that area. That's kind of a loud kind of mastered track, but anyway, that's a lot to do with mastering, and I don't want to bore you guys too much. I'm trying to teach you the basics of the mastering in this sense. So anyway, so first off, I'll show you what the track sounded like when I first got it, and then I'll show you what it sounded like when I finished with it. Obviously there's going to be a volume increase. Actually, what I might do is not put the final limiter on there so that it doesn't increase the volume. So that way we've kind of stuck to the not having a volume increase. So let me just play it quickly, a section of this track, and you guys can hear the track, and then I'll play you a section of the track with it mastered, or my mastering techniques on it, and then I'll explain the breakdown of those techniques, okay? So let's just play this track and we'll go through it right now.
Champion, I'm doing things that they once said just can't be done, and I'm laughing cause God came and that was that. He switched up my circumstances and my habitat, and now we made all the old things new again, and gave a purpose and a calling to a hooligan. Now I call you a friend, and our relationship is one that I can count on, cause you've been there when the water's deep and when it's real shallow. Give me peace in the storm, give me light in the shadow, just so I can tell the world that your name be hallowed. Now I'm on the road, doing what I was made for. So if you think about me, could you pray for me?
Think of me before you sleep, even when I'm not there. Say a little prayer for me.
Alright, so that's the track not mastered. Let's hit the plugins right now.
Conqueror, champion, I'm doing things that they once said just can't be done, and I'm laughing cause God came and that was that. He switched up my circumstances and my habitat, and now we made all the old I call you a friend. And our relationship is one that I can count on, cause you've been there when the water's deep and when it's real shallow. Give me peace in the storm, give me light in the shadow, just so I can tell the world that your name be hallowed. Now I'm on the road, doing what I was made for. So if you think about me, could you...
So obviously you could hear the difference when I just soloed it, but I activated the plugins and I deactivated them. And there was a bit of a volume increase, obviously, with the plugins themselves, because they do increase the volume, because I've done some increasing EQ. And obviously with other things there, it's increased the volume. So let's just start off with the chain that I showed you before. I just wanted to show you that as an idea, so you guys kind of know, I guess, where to start and the kind of chain that you would use in your processing. So first off, metering, I always look at this from top to bottom in that sense, because you look at it, the metering in that area. So what you would do is you get your metering, set that up. If you don't have the Brainworks metering, that's fine. Just use Studio One's metering, because you can use the VU meter, which is perfectly okay to use. And I use a spectral meter as well, so I can see exactly what's going on with the EQ. So it kind of helps you obviously analyze the whole entire track as a full track and see where things are at, and see if there's anything sticking out or frequencies that you might not have seen otherwise by hearing them. So it's not always about seeing things, it's always about listening, but I tend to just like to view things as well, so I can kind of get a gauge of where I'm at with it. So what I would normally do is set up this as just a meter there. I've got this set up as analyze, and it's that FFT analyzing, and I've got a view set here where it holds the signal for a short period of time on the peak hold, and the average also holds that as a slow hold. So I can see where the peak is, and then I can see where the average is as well. And that's through the whole entire spectrum from 20 Hertz to 20,000 or 20K. And that's that meter there. So this VU meter down here, I've set that up so it's at the scale of -12. So as you can see here, I'll just quickly play it.
I'm doing things that they once said just can't be done, and I'm laughing cause God came and that was that.
So it's kind of averaging at about -10 dB, and that's kind of the scale that I set it on, -12, just so I know where I'm at in that regard. So I guess you can watch these meters throughout the process. You don't have to watch them too much. It's more or less just at the end, keeping the peaks controlled, and at the end, just when you limit it, obviously that limiting brings the amount of compression, pretty much squeezes the track as much as possible. So with this, what I will do to show you first is the first thing I did was add an EQ, and I set it to mid-side as the mid-side processing style, so I could remove some of the low end out of the real low end stuff on the middle channel, which middle is mono. And then I set the other part to stereo, and I removed out a real decent amount, which is up to 187 Hertz from the middle channel. Then I've done some reductive EQ here and there where I felt it needed it. And the way I did that was using this, I guess it isolates the sounds, and you can kind of move across the spectrum and just listen for things that aren't sounding too good to you, and then remove them out. The way you do reductive EQ obviously is pretty narrow bands. It doesn't always have to be real narrow, but generally you kind of want to do narrow bands, especially when it's on a mastering track, because with mastering you're not really wanting to sound like you've done anything per se. You want to just remove the things that aren't pleasant to the ear and leave the things that are pleasant. So that's generally the kind of scope that you go with when you're mastering a track. You don't go in there just trying to cut out everything that you can think of that sounds bad, because this isn't what we're doing. It's a mix. It's not a mix, it's a mastering track. So that's kind of the EQs moves that I've done there. And obviously you can see this brick wall meter here. As far as I'm aware, they call them an engineer EQ brick wall, kind of similar kind of thing. So it removes out all of the below, I'll just check what band it is, 37.6 Hertz. So all of that below that, it's removed all of that out as a brick wall. It doesn't allow anything below that. So that on its own, it clears up some of the headroom when you're looking at using a limiter later on. So everything is in preparation basically for you making the track loud. So as you can see, if I just remove that, just leave it off. So you'd have to have studio monitors to listen to how that sounded, but in my studio I've got a sub below my desk and I can hear the real low end stuff, and when I moved it, it cuts it out, and it really it really helps when you're trying to create some headroom in the track and make your track a little bit louder. There's a good way to, I guess, simulate how your limiter is going to react in that sense, and is, I guess you could boost low end frequencies on your track and then put a limiter on there first, and then see how long it takes for the limiter to distort. Because usually the first thing that activates the limiter is your low end frequencies, because they're the ones holding the most power in the track. There might be some occasions where top end frequencies are doing that, but it's generally the low end that starts to affect the limiter the most, and that's where the heavy transients are. So look out for the low end frequencies when you're mastering a track. It's definitely something you want to take into consideration. The other thing I want to bring to your attention then is the next stage of compression. So the next thing I did was use a multiband compressor. Now, there's a couple of things you could do to set up a multiband compressor to work on your track, but this instance I just wanted to remove some of the top end stuff out, like the real harsh hisses, the sibilances that are around about the 6 to 10k kind of area, and I reduced them a fair amount. What I did to do that is I set up a real fast attack and a really fast release for a release time, at least anyway, and then I set a 2-to-1 ratio on the compressor there, and I let it as an automatic release, kind of adaptive release type thing. But anyway, what it ended up doing was kind of smoothing out some of those real harsh frequencies at the top there that might just be annoying in headphones. Sometimes you find that those frequencies are really ear-piercing in headphones, and that's kind of what you want to remove. So that's how I did it. I achieved it by removing them that way. There are other ways you can do it, and I've shown other videos on my channel on how to remove harsh frequencies out of your mastering track. But using this method, it seems to work quite well. Again, if there's too much and it's too hard to get it out, then it clearly tells you that whatever happened in your mix needs to be reviewed before you get to the mastering stage, because sending off a mix that's not how you want it to sound, it's got to be about at least 90% there when you go to master it, because mastering is not about making it sound completely different. It's about making that sound of your track just sound sweeter and more appealing to the ear, and that's it. And maybe messing with some stereo fields and things like that, but really at the end of the day your mix should have been right at the start. So that's the trick that I use with the compression. Let me just play it without and with, and then you can hear the difference. I'll just bypass this as a full thing there, and then you can hear how it sounds different.
Made all the old things new again, and gave a purpose and a calling to a hooligan. Now I call you a friend, and our relationship is one that I can count on, cause you've been there when the water's deep and when it's real shallow. Give me peace in the storm, give me light in the shadow, just so I can tell the world that your name be hallowed. Now I'm on the road, doing what I was made for. So if you think about me, could you pray for me? Okay, so
I mean, at the end of the day, this could be a taste thing, but in my opinion, I think that the more mid kind of frequencies that you have, the better it will sound on headphones, at least. There are some certain frequencies on headphones that just sound good, and there's ones that don't, and that's kind of something you kind of got to work around. There's always going to be compromise on mastering, because, basically, whatever you do, you're going to be compromising something to make something else sound better. It's just the way it is. Unless you've got a perfectly mixed track and it doesn't really need any touch-ups, then you're ready to go. So anyway, that's what I did with first off the EQ and then the compression, and it kind of cleaned up a little bit of the track, as you could hear, and that was the first step there. You could use this plugin just entirely to do the rest of your mastering there and go with what you've got, but I decided to split it up in a couple of different things. So I just wanted to show you that to start with. Next thing was this compressor here, which is the Alicia. It's a mastering compressor. You don't have to have this compressor to master tracks, by all means. It's just a compressor that I like to use, and there's kind of one thing that I really like about this compressor, especially about how it's got the soft clip mode down here. Now this basically clears up a little bit of headroom. It basically uses a style of limiting to soft clip the track, and creates a little bit of distortion if you're not careful with it, but it definitely helps if you are knowing how to use it and you're careful with it. Then what I did here was I set up the compressor. I'll play it without and with, or without and with then, and I'll go from there and let you guys hear it.
Conqueror, champion, I'm doing things that they once said just can't be done, and I'm laughing cause God came and that was that. He switched up my circumstances and my habitat, and now we made all the old things new again, and gave a purpose and a calling to a hooligan. Now I call you a friend, And our relationship is one that I can count on, cause you've been there when the water's deep and when it's real shallow. Give me peace in the storm, give me light in the shadow, just so I can tell the world that your name be hallowed. Now I'm on the road, doing what I was made for. So if you think about me, could you pray for me?
Alright, so as you could hear, and you can probably see, if you're paying attention, this here is the metering for this compressor. So I was really hardly doing anything on that. I was just more or less just getting the peaks and controlling the peaks. You know, if you start to compress too much on a mastering track, it will really suck the life out of the track, and that's kind of something you want to avoid if possible. The main thing with this compressor is that I kind of just had a ratio of about 1.8, and excuse me, and then I had an attack and a release setting set up basically the way that the track BPM should be set. So I'll explain to you what I mean by that, and first off I'll just show you if I can find it. Oh, here it is here. So this little trickster here, I've set up a delay calculator online. You can just type in BPM delay calculator or BPM calculator delay. It's usually for reverbs and delays and things like that, but it's handy when you're setting up a compressor as well. And the thing that you want to kind of pay attention to is the 16th note, or it depends on how the track is actually made though, but I usually look at the 16th note or the 64 note and things like that, or the 128th note. Kind of gives you an idea of, like, just looking at these here, gives you an idea of what kind of compression settings you might want to use as far as attack and release, things like that. It gives you the time in milliseconds of, you know, your BPM, and then the release of 1.8, sorry, 18th, sorry, 1/8, the 16th, and the 32, 64, 128, things like that. So that's kind of where I work around. Like, you don't have to use the exact settings that you see on here when you type in the BPM. So say I went into the calculator, I typed in 95, and then I came up with these figures here. So let's just say I went to my compressor, and then I decided I put a 36 millisecond attack. Because generally, if you're looking at, let me just show you actually the compressor that I'm talking about. It is the G channel. I'm looking at waves, my bad. Alright, so with the SSL bus compressor, a lot of people like the sound of this compressor, and I guess for good reason though. It's a pretty good compressor. So normally they've got settings of a 30 millisecond, a 10 millisecond, 3 millisecond, 1 millisecond, 0.3 and 0.1. Those settings are kind of just a generic setting that they put on there, and it's not something you can kind of alter around with the compressor like you can with this one. But I mean, if you're looking at that, you could have a 30 millisecond attack and an auto release if you wanted to, or maybe put it at 1.2, and say you had a 2 to 1 ratio, and then kind of just mess around with your threshold like that. You could do that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's just that this kind of compressor here, it's really technical as far as, you know, the released and attack settings, and it's got a high pass, not high pass, but a kind of like a gain structure there that you can use with the EQ, and then you can high pass some of the like a filter kind of thing to create different compression on different parts of the spectrum there. But nonetheless, I'll leave that part alone because it's kind of confusing when you look at this compressor what's going on. But for the general sake, if you just look at this and you just think this first row here is the threshold, the attack, the release, and the ratio. That's the kind of settings you'd see on any compressor, so there's nothing different there. Then when you get to this side, it's just more or less the stereo, I guess, EQ settings there, and then you've got sidechain and the sidechain filter, or the frequency that it uses. And then the next row down, it's just got a mix knob, so you can change the mix. It's got the gain, the soft clip function, and then these little buttons here, which is warm. So that's kind of like a tape effect, or tape kind of warm sound that it gives you. So anyway, nonetheless, this is the next compressor I used, and if you're going to try and replicate that, you could use your Studio One standard compressor and then just do minimal compression without using too much of a sidechain. You can definitely use sidechain on the standard compressor. I'll just show you that just so you know what I'm talking about. So this compressor here, it's got like a filter. You can set that up, and then you could sidechain your filter and just make it up to a certain frequency there if you wanted to, or you could leave it flat and allow it to control the entire spectrum and then just adjust your kind of your threshold and your knee and things like that to make it sound very much the same. There's no problem with this compressor. It works quite well. So I mean, if you're looking for a compressor to use, that's one as a stock plugin at least. So that's the next compressor I used. Then the next thing was the EQ. This is a passive EQ, which is similar to the massive passive. As far as I'm aware, it's replicating the kind of same kind of EQ that the massive passive, manly massive passive EQ. And if you're not sure what that is, I'll just show you what the manly massive passive looks like. I don't have it on my my plugins, but anyway, that's what it looks like. So it's very similar kind of EQ to that. And it kind of works in that kind of same way. Very subtle EQ, and it has kind of a nice smooth sound to it, and it's because it's got all these capacitors and things like that within the EQ. I would actually love to own one of those in real life. They're probably one of my favorite EQs. But anyway, so that's the passive EQ that I'm using. So I'll just show you with it and without, or without and then with, so you can hear the difference.
Champion, I'm doing things that they once said just can't be done, and I'm laughing cause God came and that was that. He switched up my circumstances and my habitat, and now we made all the old things new again, and gave a purpose and a calling to a hooligan. Now I call you a friend, and our relationship is one that I can count on, cause you've been there when the water's deep and when it's real shallow. Give me peace in the storm, give me light in the shadow, just so I can tell the world that your name be hallowed. Now I'm on the road, doing what I was made for. So if you think about me, could you pray for me?
Think of me before you.
Alright, so I've just increased a tiny bit of the stereo side of things, because what I did, I split it into the mid-side feature, so I could increase the side or decrease the side, and increase the mids and things like that. So, you know, you kind of look for minimal increments there. I didn't go anything over 3 dB on my increases on that, because I just think that it starts to mess around too much with the way that the track sounds, and you got to be careful with EQs, especially on a master, like I said earlier. But I introduced my EQ after the compression, and that's because I did my reductive EQ prior to compression, so I got rid of the sounds that I didn't want in there, and that way it didn't affect my compressor as much, not driving the compressor so much when it came to compressing it. And then I've put a EQ after that, which is allowing the signals that I wanted to come through. Now, as I said before, this little diagram, I wish I could just load it up. There we go. This little diagram here, kind of similar to the way I've set my things up here. So as you can see, I've got my gain structure, which is already fine. Got my parametric EQ, which is the reductive EQ there. Then I've got dynamics, which is the multiband compressor. And then I've got a compressor here, which I'll show you that in a second. And I've got another thing that's creating a bit more, sound to that. So I might just move that as well. So that's the steps there. So far then we've got the compressor here. This is the compressor that I've used as a secondary compressor, just to tame some of the more, I guess, really high peaks, and it's not really doing a lot, but it's definitely keeping things under control. I didn't want to do any more compression because I would have been sucking the life out of the track, so I decided to keep it minimal like this. So I'm going to play it with this compressor on, and then without it, or likewise, I'll play it the other way around actually, so without it and then with it on.
Champion, I'm doing things that they once said just can't be done, and I'm laughing cause God came and that was that. He switched up my circumstances and my habitat, and now we made all the old things new again, and gave a purpose and a calling to a hooligan. Now I call you a friend, and our relationship is one that I can count on, cause you've been there when the water's deep and when it's real shallow. Give me peace in the storm, give me light in the shadow, just so I can tell the world that your name be hallowed. Now I'm on the road, doing what I was made for. So if you think about me, could you pray for me?
Think of me before you sleep, even when I'm not there.
Alright, so as you can hear, it's not really doing too much, but it definitely helps the peaks be under control, and it brings certain volume to the track as well, but not a whole lot, because I'm really not increasing much. It's just 0.5 increasing. It's not even dB, it's half a dB. So I'll leave that on there. Alright, so the next thing, I'll just take that away so you don't have to focus on that. Actually, I want to explain something quickly on that. So I've set a ratio here, so it was at a bit of a mix, but you can leave it at 100% just to keep the transients intact. The release time is the setting of the actual BPM of the track, so 95 BPM, and the attack is at 39 milliseconds, which is quite a reasonably mid fastish kind of attack. But anyway, so I've left that kind of similar attack to the other compressor there. This other compressor that I've introduced, it's not actually compressing, I'm just using it for the characteristics and saturation, and it's got this other thing called character, which just gives it some fatness to the track. And it's got a mix dial here, which I've pretty much only given it about 27% of those two things that I've added there. Let me play it without, and then I'll play it with it as well.
Conqueror, champion, I'm doing things that they once said just can't be done, and I'm laughing cause God came and that was that. He switched up my circumstances and my habitat, and now we made all the old things new again, and gave a purpose and a calling to a hooligan. Now I call you a friend, and our relationship is one that I can count on, cause you've been there when the water's deep and when it's real shallow. Give me peace in the storm, give me light in the shadow, just so I can tell the world that your name be hallowed. Now I'm on the road, doing what I was made for. So if you think about me, could you pray for me?
Think of me before you sleep.
Conqueror, champion, I'm doing things that they once said just can't be done, and I'm laughing cause God came and that was that. He switched up my circumstances and my habitat, and now we made all the old things new again, and gave a purpose and a calling to a hooligan. Now I call you a friend, and our relationship is one that I can count on, cause you've been there when the water's deep.
Alright, so that's just gives it a little bit of, distortion. Not so much distortion, well, it gives it a bit of saturation on this part of the plugin there. And this fatness, well, it's kind of giving it a bit of low-end beef that maybe tape would have given. I don't have any actual tape plugins, which I probably would like to get a tape plugin from maybe UAD, but I don't know. I feel like sometimes those things are really difficult to use because they just add certain saturations that you don't want to have. Even with this thing, you got to be really careful as well. But this is part of the Komplete Native Instruments Komplete setup there. So if you get the Komplete 9, or whether they're up to what they've got now, I think it's 11. I'm sure it's still in there, and they come with that there. So it's just a little nifty plugin that not many people use, and I know that some of Jay-Z's stuff, his audio engineer used this compressor. Well, as far as I know, he did anyway, because it was been around for a while. So anyway, so I've introduced that. I just set a real light mix ratio on that, and I set it to mid-side, so it's just giving me a bit of tone there. And then the final thing here was the exciting and the imaging and the maximizer. I saved the maximizer off, obviously, so I didn't increase the volume too much, and I didn't, just blow your ears out. So let me put this plugin on and off, as per usual, and we'll go through that, and then I'll just explain what I did there. So first off, I'll play it without it.
Conqueror, champion, I'm doing things that they once said just can't be done, and I'm laughing cause God came and that was that. He switched up my circumstances and my habitat, and now we made all the old things new again, and gave a purpose and a call to a hooligan. Now I call you a friend, and our relationship is one that I can count on, cause you've been there when the water's deep and when it's real shallow. Give me peace in the storm, give me light in the shadow, just so I can tell the world that your name be hallowed. Now I'm on the road, doing what I was made for. So if you think about me, could you pray for me?
Think of me.
Alright, so, okay, starting off with the exciter. This is getting a bit of distortion to the track. It's not too bad. It's going through a tube, what you would emulate as a tube distortion there. And it's creating a little bit of that top end stuff as well. I did remove some with the filter that it comes in this. So if you just click on this little thing here, if you have Ozone 6 and it has a filter in there, you just click on that and you can remove some out with the filter there as well. So that's what I did. Next thing there was a stereo imager, and it kind of just controls the low end. So the low end frequencies are all basically in mono all the way up to 200. And I've just set that all the way down there, so that's a mono frequency, so as you can see. Alright, so next thing was obviously these frequencies here, so I'll just play those. And then the next frequency is really high stuff. And then extremely high. Okay, so what you notice here is I've kind of set it in a path where it's more mono on the lower end frequencies, so it doesn't go too wide on the speakers, and especially in headphones it sometimes sounds weird when it's really wide. Sometimes it sounds okay, but it depends on what you got going on. Anyway, so that's the way I set it up. And then I've got this stereoizer here, which I moved up to 5.6, which just made it sound a bit better and a bit wider and more clarity in the mix. Okay, so the final stage is the maximization of the track. So to get the maximization or the most volume out of your track, you need to put a limiter or a maximizer on there. And this is the one that I'm using at this point in time. So IRC2, which is the setting that I've got there, I'll just turn this on so you can see what's going on. So first off, setting this up, I normally have this all the way at the top here, like the threshold. I bring it all the way back up so it doesn't increase the volume. And I bring both of these down together as much as possible. Waves have a great plugin, or other plugins as well. Like you can get one from the Pro L, which is, let's see if I can see it actually. FabFilter to make Pro L. I don't think I have the demo anymore. No, I don't. So anyway, I might end up buying this, but you can use the settings. You can bring down the threshold and the maximization at the same time. So there's other ones that you can do it on as well. Anyway, nonetheless, we don't have it, so let's just focus on what we do have. So I basically would bring down the threshold at the same time with the ceiling and make sure the volume doesn't increase too much, and then I audition it. There's this little ear thing here you can audition stuff with, so it kind of helps you do that. But anyway, so I did that, so I ended up with this volume increase. Now turn your monitors down or your headphones down if you've got them up loud, because at this point the volume might increase a fair bit. So I'll play this to you now, and I'll just show you what it sounds like.
Conqueror, champion, I'm doing things that they once said just can't be done, and I'm laughing cause God came and that was that. He switched up my circumstances and my habitat, and now we made all the old things new again, and gave a purpose and a calling to a hooligan. Now I call you a friend, and our relationship is one that I can count on, cause you've been there when the water's deep and when it's real shallow. Give me peace in the storm, give me light in the shadow, just so I can tell the world that your name be hallowed. Now I'm on the road, doing what I was made for. So if you think about me, could you pray for me?
Think of me before you.
Okay, so what did I do to set this limiter up? All I had to do was figure out where the transients and I guess the most maximization could occur, because you know, when you're looking at a limiter, especially on the mix bus, the final thing that you're putting on there, you kind of want to look at the amount of reduction that you're getting. So as you can see here,
Champion, I'm doing things that they once said just can't be done, and I'm laughing cause God came and that
maximum of about -3 that I'm getting. So I guess -3 is kind of where you want to look at. If it's getting more than that, then there might be a bit of distortion happening with the limiter. Unless you got some kind of fancy limiter I don't know about that doesn't create distortion, but as far as I know, most of them kind of seem to create distortion when they get past about -6, or even earlier than that. Some of them do it worse on -4, -3, but reduction wise I'm talking about. So that's the setup that I use for that. I've got this true peak limiting function set as well, so it can see the transients before it actually hits it. So it's preempting the transient so I can time the limiting at that correct time so it doesn't distort. And then I've got the character set at smooth, which is 33.6, sorry, and that's just the release times on the limiter there. So that's pretty much it. I mean, the next stage is you'd go to your dithering, and then you can set up dithering and things like that. You can put a DC offset filter there, which helps correct the DC, which might clear up a little bit more headroom for you. But apart from that, you know, you set it to CD if you're going to iTunes and things like that. You can set up your dithering however you need to and go from there. But I mean, for the most part, most limiters have dithering on them, generally anyway, except for the one that's in Studio One that doesn't have that. So yeah, I mean, I hope you guys kind of enjoyed this video. It's just a step-by-step kind of guide on kind of what I do when I master my tracks and how I make them sound good. Now, I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, there's no rule of thumb, so you can just do whatever you feel like on your tracks. But this little guide here that I showed you at the start, that kind of helps you kind of work through the processes of what you should do at what time and how you introduce certain things. So I mean, if you're looking at introducing certain EQs or whatever you might be doing on your mastering, that's a kind of a good step-by-step guide to look at that. And at the end, obviously, you've got your metering, which you set up at the start anyway. So you should be seeing the metering throughout the whole thing anyway to see where you're at. But I look at the correlation to see if my thing's still in phase, and the balance, whether or not it's left or right, or if it's in the center. And the dynamic range on this meter, it tells you a lot. If you don't have a meter like that, there is another meter you can use that's standard to Studio One. It's not all the best, but it's adequate if you need something. This level meter here, so you can just get that, stretch it across here, bring it down, and then just monitor your
Conqueror, champion. I'm doing things that they once said just can't be done, and I'm laughing cause God came in.
So it kind of helps you, I guess, kind of see where you're at, and you can, as far as I know, let's see if I can find it. It's got a correlation meter, yeah. So you can see your peak.
Conqueror, champion. I'm doing things that they once said just can't be done.
Your peak RMS is around about here, so about -9, -10. So that's kind of where your RMS is at. Well, you're looking at RMS, it shows you there on the meter. So it shows that little white line, and then your peaks here, so it shows it up here just before -0. So if you're looking at a meter and you want something that's not, you don't have to pay for, then I'm sure there's other meters out there that you can probably get. But this meter works fine. It shows you the correlation as well if you're looking at that. So correlation is just in phase, if you're looking for the phase of that. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'm going to do some more later on about mastering. I might actually do a video on fully mastering a track and just go by step and not explain any of it, just do it without talking, and you guys can watch it from that side of things as well. So otherwise, I'll let you guys go, and peace.